welcome to whispers in the dark. My name was Elise Vare. I say was because I am not sure names matter where I am now. I am not sure bodies matter either, but I remember mine. I remember the weight of it. I remember hunger turning my stomach into a fist. I remember my own hands, small and dirty, curled around the bars of a narrow basement window, while rain came down outside, and the people upstairs walked across the floorboards like ordinary parents in an ordinary house. I remember the smell of wet stone, rusted drains, and old bleach. I remember the chain around my ankle. I remember counting the drops from the ceiling, because numbers were the only things that did not hurt me. Most of all, I remember the woman in the corner. She was not there at first. At first, there was only the dark, the mattress, the bucket, the chain, and the voice of the woman upstairs calling me sweet names through the cellar door before she came down with the metal tray. But after a while, after the first week or month or year, time became shapeless, and the woman appeared. She crouched where the wall met the floor, her knees bent too high, her hair hanging over her face in black ropes. Her skin was gray and split in places like old paper soaked in water. I could hear her breathing even when I held my own breath. I could hear her fingernails scratching gently at the concrete. She never spoke, not once. She only watched me. When the people came down, she would crawl closer. When the man lifted me by the hair and pressed my face into the cold floor, she would open her mouth, wider than a mouth should open, and tremble with a kind of hunger that seemed meant for me. When the woman in the clean blouse washed the blood from my knees and told me I was doing so well, the thing in the corner would lean forward and smile through the ropes of her hair. I was 12 years old when I escaped. I do not know how I found the strength. Maybe children are not strong. Maybe children are empty enough for something else to move through them. The man forgot the latch on the inner door. That was all. Years of ritual, locks, needles, prayers whispered over my shaking body, and in the end, one tired hand failed to turn one small piece of metal. I ran barefoot through the basement corridor, past shelves of jars and stained sheets folded with hospital care. I found stairs. I climbed them on hands and knees because my legs could not remember what they were for. The house above was warm. There were framed photographs in the hall. There was a bowl of apples on a table. There was a coat hanging by the door. I still remember those apples. Bright red, polished, impossible. The woman in the clean blouse saw me from the kitchen. She did not scream at first. She simply looked disappointed. Then I opened the front door and ran into the rain. I ran through mud, through trees, through thorn bushes that tore my arms and face. I ran until the world blurred into black trunks and white sky. I ran until my lungs burned so badly I thought the thing inside me might come tearing out through my mouth. Behind me, far away, I heard the man shouting. I heard dogs. I heard the woman calling my name like a mother calling a child in for supper. Elise, she called. Elise, come back. You are almost there. I collapsed at the edge of a road just before dawn. A lorry driver found me curled beside the ditch, naked except for a torn nightdress, my ankle raw where the cuff had chewed through skin. He told the police later that I would not stop whispering. They are still in the house. They are still in the house. They are still in the house. But when officers searched the property I described, there was no chain, no mattress, no bucket, no trays, no people, only an empty farmhouse at the edge of Alderwick Wood, its windows boarded, its rooms full of dust, its cellar clean and bare. They said I had been confused. They said trauma does that. They said a child can turn memory into nightmare. They put me in a hospital with pale green walls and nurses who smelled like soap. They asked me questions. They showed me drawings. They told me I was safe so often that the word lost shape. It became a noise, like water in pipes. That was where I met Mara. She was not a nurse. She was another patient. 14 years old, sharp-elbowed, dark-eyed, with a shaved head and a scar across her chin, from a fight she refused to explain. She arrived 2 weeks after me and took one look at the other girls whispering around me and sat down on my bed like she owned it. You look haunted, she said. I told her nothing. She nodded toward the corner of the room. Is it there now? My blood went cold. Mara shrugged and stole a biscuit from my tray. Mine used to sit on the ceiling, she said. I stopped feeding it. I did not know what she meant. Not then. But she stayed. She stayed through the screaming nights, through the times I woke clawing at my own throat, through the times I tore open my skin because I could feel the chain still under it. She held my wrists when I tried to hurt myself. She told the nurses to stop touching me when I froze. She sat on the floor outside the bathroom when I could not wash alone. When I told her about the farmhouse, she believed me. That was all it took. Not proof, not justice, not a signed confession from the dead. Just one person who looked at me and said, I believe you. 15 years passed. We grew into women, or something like women. Mara became a locksmith and later a private investigator, though mostly she followed cheating husbands and photographed men climbing out of hotel windows. I became quiet. I worked nights in a print shop because daylight made everything look too exposed. We shared a flat above a shuttered bakery, and neither of us ever asked why we both slept with knives under our pillows. The woman in the corner never left me. She changed as I changed. When I was 12, she was a corpse thing with hanging hair and broken hands. When I was 27, she was thinner, longer, harder to see unless the room was very dark. She lived in reflections, in windows at night, in the black screen of my phone, in the blind spot behind my shoulder. Sometimes I woke with scratches down my chest and knew she had been close. Sometimes I heard her breathing beneath my bed. Sometimes I saw her face in Mara's when Mara smiled. On the night everything began again, Mara came home with a brown envelope under her coat. It was raining. Of course it was raining. In memory, everything important happens in rain. She stood in the doorway, dripping onto the mat, her eyes bright with the kind of anger she tried to hide by laughing. "I found them," she said. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pressing a cigarette into an ashtray, though I had forgotten to light it. "Who?" Mara placed the envelope in front of me. "The people from the house." For a moment, I did not move. The flat hummed around us. The refrigerator clicked. A bus sighed at the stop below. Somewhere in the walls, the pipes knocked like someone trapped inside them. I opened the envelope. There were photographs. A large house in the countryside, white stone walls stained by ivy, tall windows glowing with warm evening light. A man in his 60s carrying groceries from a car. A woman with silver hair cutting roses in a garden. A young man, maybe 20, smiling at something outside the frame. A teenage girl in a school uniform stepping through the front gate. The older woman was not the same as the one from my memories. At least, that is what I told myself for the first 5 seconds. Then I saw her hands. Long fingers, clean nails, a little gold ring on the right hand. I had watched that hand tighten straps around my wrists. I had watched that ring flash under a bare bulb while she wiped my blood from a tile floor. My breath left me. Mara sat opposite me. "Her name is Celine Armand now," she said. "Her husband is Robert Armand. They used to own land near Alderwick Wood under a different name. No criminal record. No reports. No missing children connected to them that I could find. They moved 5 times in 15 years. I touched the photograph of the man. He had gained weight. His hair had gone mostly white, but his mouth was the same. Thin, careful, almost kind until it opened. "They have children," I said. Mara nodded. "Adrian, 21, Lisa, 16. Something inside me cracked so quietly, only I could hear it. Children. They had kept me chained beneath the earth. And then gone on to fill a house with birthday cakes, school bags, dentist appointments, and family photographs. Mara took my hand. "We can go to the police," she said. We both knew we would not. The police had already searched the house and found nothing. Doctors had already called me confused. The world had already decided that some kinds of suffering are too ugly to believe unless there are bodies stacked neatly beside them. That night, Mara packed a bag. I watched her load it with things she had no business owning. Black gloves, cable ties, a torch, 2 knives, a compact pistol wrapped in a towel. She had bought it years ago from a man who sold stolen radios behind the railway arches. I had hated it then. That night, I looked at it and felt nothing. Mara saw me staring. "You do not have to come," she said. I almost laughed. The woman in the corner was standing behind her. Her face was split in a grin. We drove before dawn. The roads narrowed as we left the city. Shops became petrol stations. Petrol stations became fields. Fields became woodland. The sky lightened slowly, bruised purple at the edges, and mist gathered low over the hedges like breath held close to the ground. Neither of us spoke much. Mara drove. I sat beside her with the photographs in my lap, and my fingers pressed into the paper so hard the edges bent. Every few miles, I saw the woman outside the window, keeping pace between the trees. Sometimes she crawled on all fours. Sometimes she walked upright, too tall and thin, her head bent beneath the branches. By the time we reached the Armand house, the rain had stopped. It was larger than in the photographs. 3 stories of pale stone, slate roof, iron gate, gravel drive. Roses climbed the front wall in pink and white clusters. A child's bicycle leaned beside the garage. There were wind chimes near the kitchen door, and they made small, delicate sounds in the morning air. It looked like a place where nothing bad had ever happened. That was the worst part. Mara parked beyond the lane, hidden by trees. We crossed the ditch and moved through wet grass toward the back of the property. She had planned everything. She had watched the family for 2 weeks. She knew Robert left for his Sunday walk at 7. She knew Celine made coffee at 7:15. She knew Adrian slept late, and Lisa practiced piano in the front room before breakfast. I remember thinking, this is madness. Then I saw Celine through the kitchen window. She stood by the sink, silver hair pinned neatly, blue cardigan buttoned to the throat. She poured coffee into a white mug. For 1 second, her face turned toward the glass, and I was 12 again, shivering on concrete, while that same face looked down at me with gentle disappointment. My hand found the pistol in Mara's bag. Mara whispered my name. I did not hear it. I smashed the kitchen window with a garden stone and climbed through before the glass had finished falling. Celine screamed. The sound was high, human, ordinary. She dropped the mug. Coffee spread across the tiles in a brown fan. I remember the smell of it, rich and warm, mixed with the green scent of crushed tomato stems from pots on the sill. She backed away. "Do you remember me?" I asked. Her face changed. Not much, not enough for a stranger to notice. But I saw it. Recognition passed through her eyes like a fish turning beneath dark water. Then she said, very softly, "Oh, Elise." I shot her in the chest. The sound filled the kitchen and emptied the world. Celine struck the counter behind her and slid to the floor, leaving a red smear on the white cabinet. Her mouth opened and closed. One hand pressed uselessly at the wound. The gold ring flashed. Mara came through the window behind me, swearing. But I was already walking toward the hall. Robert appeared at the foot of the stairs, in a brown dressing gown. He had heard the shot. Of course he had. His face was pale, his hair wild from sleep, but his eyes were clear. He looked first at Celine on the floor, then at me. For a moment, I thought he might deny it. Instead, he whispered, "You should not have come back." I fired twice, The first shot struck his shoulder and spun him into the banister. The second hit his throat. He made a wet, choking sound and clutched at himself as if embarrassed by the mess. Blood pulsed between his fingers. He sat down heavily on the stairs, then folded sideways like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Mara was shouting now. "Elise, stop." But the house had awakened. Feet pounded above us. A door slammed. Someone cried out for their mother. Adrian came first. Shirtless, tall, confused. Beautiful in the terrible way young people are beautiful when they do not yet understand that bodies can be opened. He froze halfway down the stairs when he saw Robert bleeding below him. "Dad," he looked at me. The pistol trembled in my hand. He was innocent. I knew that. I knew it the way you know a knife is sharp before it cuts. But then the woman from the corner crawled down the wall behind him, her hair dragging over the wallpaper, her mouth stretched wide, and she whispered without speaking, "They are all in the house." I shot Adrian in the face. His head snapped back. He fell down the stairs and landed beside his father with a sound I still hear. A heavy, final sound, meat and bone meeting polished wood. Marva grabbed my arm. "No more," she said. Her voice broke. "No more." Then Lisa screamed from the landing. She was 16, with long brown hair and bare feet, wearing a white nightdress with tiny yellow flowers on it. She looked nothing like her mother. She looked like a girl who had been woken by thunder. She stared at the bodies below her, and then at me, and her scream became a thin sound without breath. I raised the gun. Mara hit me across the face. Hard. The blow knocked me sideways into the wall. The pistol fell from my hand and skidded across the hall. Mara stood between me and the staircase, both hands raised as if I were an animal. She did not know, Mara said. "Look at her." She did not know. Lisa sobbed above us. Celine made a sound from the kitchen. "Not dead. Not yet." I turned back. Mara shouted my name. But this time, I was not going for the gun. I walked into the kitchen and knelt beside the woman who had once washed my blood from her hands in a basement sink. Celine's lips were blue. Her cardigan was soaked black at the chest. She looked smaller on the floor, older, almost pitiful. Almost. "Where is it?" I asked. Her eyes moved to mine. "Where is the cellar?" She smiled. It was a tiny smile, a private smile, the smile of someone listening to music only she can hear. "You are not chosen for revenge," she whispered. Blood bubbled at the corner of her mouth. "You were chosen because you endured." I pressed my fingers into the wound. She gasped, "Where is the cellar?" Celine's hand lifted slowly. She pointed toward the pantry. Then she died. The pantry smelled of flour, onions, and lavender cleaning soap. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with jars, tins, folded cloths. Mara stood in the doorway, breathing hard, blood on her cheek from a cut made by the broken kitchen glass. Lisa sobbed somewhere upstairs, quieter now, as if her throat had torn. I pulled at shelves. Mara helped because she always helped me, even when she hated what I had become. Behind a rack of preserves, we found the seam. A hidden door set into the wall. Steel under painted wood. A keypad beside it. Mara pushed me aside. "Let me." Her hands moved quickly. She had always been good with locks. "Better with locked things than living things," she used to say. The panel clicked open after less than a minute. The door swung inward. Cold air breathed out. Not cellar air. Hospital air. Bleach metal, old wounds. Mara whispered God. There were stairs beyond the door, descending beneath the house. They were not old stone steps like in my memories. These were clean concrete, lit by narrow strips of white light. At the bottom, a corridor stretched away into darkness, the walls tiled in pale green. Safe green. Hospital green. I took the pistol from the floor. Mara did not stop me this time. We descended. Every step carried me backward. The years stripped away. I felt the chain again. I felt the cold mattress. I felt the woman upstairs pressing a spoon to my mouth and telling me to swallow. The corridor below was silent except for the hum of ventilation and the distant drip of water. Rooms opened on either side. The first held shelves of files, dozens of them, hundreds, each marked with a name, a date, and a number. Some names had red stamps across them. Failed, failed, failed. Others had black ribbons tied around them. The second room held clothing, children's clothing, women's dresses, men's shoes, neatly washed, folded, cataloged. Some items were old enough to belong to another century. A little blue coat hung from a hook, its sleeves limp. Mara pressed her fist to her mouth. The third room held photographs. I saw myself, not the woman I was now. The child, 12 years old, naked, shaved, eyes too large for my face. There were photographs of me standing against a height chart, lying on a metal table, sitting in the corner of a room with my knees pulled to my chest. In one photograph, I was staring directly into the lens, and behind me, faint but visible in the shadow, was the woman with the hanging hair. I stumbled back. Mara caught me. "Do you see her?" I whispered. Mara looked at the photograph. Her face went white. "Yes," she said. "That was when the lights went out. Darkness came down so completely it felt poured over us." Mara swore and grabbed my wrist. Somewhere in the corridor ahead, a door opened. Then another. Then another. Footsteps approached from the dark. Not one person. Several. Mara pulled me into the photograph room and shut the door. A red emergency light flickered on above the frame, turning everything the color of raw flesh. She shoved a cabinet against the door while I stood in the middle of the room, staring at my own childhood face repeated across the walls. The footsteps stopped outside. A voice spoke. Elise Vare. It was not Robert, not Selling. A woman's voice, calm, older, educated. We have waited a long time for you. Mara lifted the pistol from my shaking hand and aimed it at the door. Who are you? She shouted. The woman outside sighed. Names are decorations. Open the door. Mara fired through it. The shot punched a hole in the wood. Someone outside gasped, then fell. For 1 second, there was silence. Then the door exploded inward. Men came through wearing gray masks and black gloves. Mara fired again. One man folded. Another slammed into her, driving her into the wall so hard the photographs shook loose and rained down around them. I grabbed a metal tray from a shelf and struck the nearest mask. It cracked. Blood burst from beneath it. Hands seized my hair, my arms, my throat. I saw Mara on the floor, fighting like an animal. Her teeth sunk into someone's wrist. Then a needle entered my neck. The room stretched. The red light became a tunnel. At the far end of it, the woman with the hanging hair crouched and waited. When I woke, I was strapped to a bed. Not a bed, a table. Leather cuffs held my wrists, ankles, thighs, waist, chest, and forehead. My mouth was dry. My limbs were heavy. Above me, white lights glared from a ceiling too high to be a cellar. Machines stood around me. Steel trays, glass bottles, a camera on a tripod. The air smelled of antiseptic, and something underneath it, sweet and rotten. A woman sat beside me. She was very old, older than Selling. Her hair was white and combed back from a narrow face. She wore a black dress and pearl earrings. Her posture was perfect. In one gloved hand, she held a small notebook. "Good morning, Elise," she said. My tongue felt too large. "Where is Mara?" The old woman looked almost kind. "Your friend is alive." I tried to move. The straps held. "Where?" "Being prepared." "No." The word tore out of me as a dry rasp. "No." The old woman leaned closer. "My name is Madame Voss." "That will do, since you seem to need a handle to hold. I am not your enemy, Elise. I am the custodian of an inquiry older than any of us. Selling and Robert were caretakers, clumsy ones toward the end. Sentimental. Domesticity softens the mind. I stared at her. "You are insane." She smiled. That is what people say when a purpose frightens them. She opened the notebook. For more than a century, we have searched for a certain state. Not death. Death is common. Death tells us nothing. But there are people who, under extreme suffering, cross a threshold while the body remains alive. Their eyes change. Their voices change. They see something. Some return with nonsense. Some return with silence. A few return with testimony. The woman in the corner was behind Madame Voss now. Her hands rested on the old woman's shoulders. "You tortured children," I whispered. "We refined conditions. You killed them. Most failed." I began to laugh. I could not help it. It came out broken, ugly, almost soundless. Madame Voss watched me with faint curiosity. You escaped, Elise. That has always troubled us. You reached the edge of the state and fled before completion. Yet the entity remained with you, a residue, a companion. You have seen her all these years, have you not? My laughter died. The old woman nodded. Yes, we know. What is she? Madame Voss looked past me, as if she too could see the thing crouched at the head of the table. A witness, perhaps, or a parasite, or the shape your mind gave to the door before it opened. She stood. We hoped you would return one day. Survivors often orbit the wound. Sooner or later, they come home. 2 masked men entered. One carried a tray. On it lay scissors, syringes, clamps, gauze, and a small silver bell. Madame Voss touched my cheek. Do not waste your hatred on us, Elise. Hatred burns too hot and too quickly. We need you beyond hatred. The first days were simple. That is what my mind calls them now. Simple. As if simplicity makes them less monstrous. They deprived me of sleep. Every time my eyes closed, light struck my face, or sound screamed through speakers hidden in the walls. They fed me broth through a tube when I refused to eat. They washed me with cold water while attendants recorded my pulse, my temperature, the dilation of my pupils. They asked questions. What do you see? Where is she standing? Does she speak? Do you feel yourself separating from the body? I answered with curses until my throat failed. They showed me Mara through a screen. She was in another room, tied to a chair, her face swollen, one eye closed. When she saw me on the monitor, she leaned forward against her restraints. Elise, she said. Her voice was thin but steady. Do not give them anything. An attendant struck her across the mouth. I screamed until blood came up. Madame Voss stood beside my table and watched. Attachment is useful at first, she said. Later, we remove it. I do not know how long it lasted. Underground, time is not a line. It is a room you cannot leave. There were no windows, no clocks, only cycles of light and dark, pain and waiting, questions and silence. They cut me, but not deeply at first. They were careful. That was the horror of it. Not rage, not frenzy. Care. Gloved hands measuring distances on skin. Needles delivering exact amounts. Blades opened in sterile packaging. A young attendant with kind brown eyes cleaned my wounds and whispered apologies when no one else could hear. His name was Thomas. I learned it because Madame Voss said it once. Thomas increased the saline. He could not have been older than 25. The first time he was alone with me, I asked him why. He paused with a bandage in his hand. Why what? Why do you help them? He looked at the floor. My sister was chosen, he said. Chosen. The word tasted like poison. He swallowed. She reached the state. She spoke after. Only one sentence, but it was enough. What did she say? Thomas looked at me then, and in his eyes I saw not cruelty, but faith. That was worse. She said the dark was full of eyes, and all of them were God. After that, he never spoke to me unless ordered. The woman with the hanging hair stayed close. Sometimes she crouched on my chest, though I felt no weight. Sometimes she crawled along the ceiling above the operating lights. Sometimes she placed her mouth beside my ear and exhaled air that smelled of wet soil. She was changing again. Her skin no longer looked gray. It looked like mine. Her hands were my hands. The torn places in her flesh matched the wounds on my body. I began to understand that she had never been separate. Or maybe she wanted me to think that. One day or night, they brought Mara into the room. She walked between two attendants. She was barefoot, wrists bound, her face bruised purple and yellow. But she was standing. She saw me strapped to the table, and something in her expression collapsed. Not fear, grief. "Oh, Elise," she whispered. I tried to speak. My lips cracked. "I am sorry." Mara shook her head. "No, no, you do not get to be sorry. You get to live." Madame Voss stood behind her. "Your friend has been resistant," she said. "Admirable, really. But she is not suitable. Her suffering turns outward. Yours turns inward. That is rare." Mara spat at her. Madame Voss did not flinch. "Elise," she said, "we are approaching the next stage. Attachment must be severed." The attendants forced Mara to her knees beside the table. "No," I said. My voice was barely sound. "No." Mara looked at me. Her good eye shone wetly. "Listen to me," she said. "You are not what they make you. You hear me? You are not the room. You are not the chain. You are not the thing that follows you." Madame Voss nodded to Thomas. He raised a pistol. Mara kept looking at me. "I love you," she said. I think I said it back. I hope I did. The shot was very loud. Mara's body fell against the side of the table, and her blood spread warm across my dangling fingers. For one moment, I felt her pulse flutter against my skin. Then it stopped. Something opened in me. Not the door they wanted. Something older. I screamed, but it did not come from my mouth. It came from the walls. The lights burst above me one by one, raining sparks and glass. An attendant shouted. Another crossed himself. Madame Voss stepped back, her face shining with wonder. "Yes," she whispered. The woman with the hanging hair crawled onto the table and lay down inside me. After Mara, I left language. Words became little bones at the bottom of a well. I knew they were there, but I could not reach them. They kept working. The careful cuts became deeper. The drugs became stronger. They suspended me upright for hours, my feet barely touching the floor, my arms stretched above me until my shoulders felt as if they belonged to someone else. They lowered me into freezing water and held me under until my lungs convulsed, then brought me back. They burned symbols into my skin that were not religious symbols, not exactly, but diagrams of thresholds, circles broken by lines, eyes inside doors, inside eyes. Through it all, Madame Voss watched. Sometimes she read from old notebooks. Subject 42 displayed ocular whitening at the 17th hour. Subject 69 described a plane of glass beneath the earth. Subject 81 begged for mother until cardiac failure. Subject 112 spoke in a language unknown to all present. Recording damaged. She wanted me to join their archive. A voice in a file, a sentence in a notebook, a wound with a number. But pain is not only pain after a while. It becomes weather. It becomes landscape. You stop being the person beneath it and become the place where it happens. That was when I began to see the others, not hallucinations. I had known hallucinations all my life. The woman in the corner had been one, or something like one. These were different. They stood at the edges of the room, just beyond the lights. Children, women, men. Their bodies bore the marks of different decades. A girl in a blue coat with no eyes. A man with his mouth sewn shut. A woman whose arms hung backward. A boy with a shaved head holding a tin cup. They watched in silence, not with pity, with recognition. I was becoming visible to them. Thomas noticed first. During one procedure, he dropped a scalpel and stared at the corner behind Madame Voss. She turned sharply. "What is it?" He shook his head, trembling. "Nothing." But I saw what he saw. Mara was standing there, not as she had died, not with blood on her mouth and one eye swollen shut. She stood whole, calm, wearing the black coat she had worn the morning we drove to the house. Her shaved head gleamed under the light. Her scar cut her chin like a pale thread. She looked at me. "Hold on," her eyes seemed to say. Or maybe let go. I could no longer tell the difference. The final stage began in a white room. They moved me there after what Madame Voss called the preparation. I remember being carried through corridors, my body wrapped in clean linen, my wounds packed and dressed. I remember seeing doors open as we passed. Behind one, people in formal clothes sat in rows like an audience awaiting a concert. Men and women, old mostly, wealthy, their faces hungry with reverence. The order, that was what I called them in my head. They had come to witness. The white room was circular. The walls curved without corners. The ceiling was glass, though beyond it there was no sky, only darkness. In the center stood a metal frame like a narrow bed turned upright. Straps hung from it. Beneath it was a drain. Madame Voss entered wearing a white apron over her black dress. Her hands shook slightly as she touched my face. "You are very close, Elise." I wanted to bite her fingers off. I did not have the strength. She seemed to understand. "Do you think I enjoy cruelty?" she asked. I blinked slowly. She smiled with sadness. "Cruelty is vulgar. This is devotion. Humanity wastes suffering every day. War, disease, abuse, accidents. All that agony spilled into the ground with no witness, no harvest. We give it meaning. Mara stood behind her. The woman with the hanging hair stood behind Mara. The dead stood behind them both. Madame Voss leaned close. At the threshold, there will be terror. Do not cling to it. Terror is the last defense of the body. Beyond it, there may be light. They fastened me to the frame. The audience entered. They filled the curved wall behind a pane of glass I had not noticed before. Faces pale in the glow. Pearls, suits, wedding rings, thin lips, wet eyes. Thomas stood among the attendants, looking ill. I wondered if he was thinking of his sister. I wondered if Faith had ever given him warmth, or only permission. Madame Voss lifted a small silver bell from a tray and rang it once. The sound was pure and delicate. Then they began. I will not give every detail, not because I do not remember. I remember too well. I remember the sound my own body made when it could no longer protect itself. I remember the way the room tilted when the mind tried to flee, but found every exit guarded. I remember skin becoming distance. I remember breath becoming an object I had to carry. I remember Madame Voss murmuring encouragement as if I were giving birth. Good, Elise. Stay with us. What do you see? At first, I saw only the room, the frame, the glass, the watching faces, my blood running in thin paths toward the drain. Then the room became far away. Pain did not disappear. It expanded until there was no longer an Elise separate from it. My body was a red star. Every nerve burned outward. The white walls pulsed. The dead pressed closer. Mara stood at the foot of the frame, crying silently. The woman with the hanging hair came to me. For the first time, her face was uncovered. It was mine, not as I was on the frame, not as I had been as a child. It was my face stripped of every age, every defense, every lie. Her eyes were black at first. Then they filled with points of light, thousands of them, like stars seen from the bottom of a grave. She opened her mouth. This time she spoke. Do you want to know? I tried to answer. My lips moved. Yes. The room folded. That is the only way I can describe it. It did not fade or spin. It folded inward like paper being creased by invisible hands. The white walls met the ceiling. The ceiling met the floor. The faces behind the glass stretched into long, pale smears. Madame Voss became a black vertical line. The frame disappeared. I fell without moving. I fell through myself. I fell through the cellar where I had been 12 years old and saw myself curled on the mattress, counting drops. I wanted to touch that child. I wanted to tell her there would be Mara, and rain, and coffee, and rage, and that none of it would save her, but some of it would matter. Then I fell through the arm-end kitchen. Celine's blood spread across the tiles in reverse, flowing back into her chest. Robert rose, choking from the stairs. Adrian's face remade itself around the bullet wound. Lisa screamed backward until the scream was only breath. Then I fell through every room, beneath every house. I saw the blue coat girl. I saw Thomas's sister, eyes white, lips moving around a sentence that made the dark shudder. I saw rows of bodies on tables, in pits, in hospital beds, in battlefields, in bedrooms, in wrecked cars, in locked cupboards. I saw suffering not as events, but as a single ocean, black and endless, and every human life, a cup dipped briefly into it. Then I saw the eyes. They were not in the dark. They were the dark. Millions, no more than millions. They opened inside everything. Inside bone, inside rain, inside teeth, inside the spaces between thoughts. They watched without kindness and without cruelty. They watched the way the sky watches, the way the sea receives the drowned, the way mirrors hold whatever stands before them and keep nothing. I understood then that Madame Voss had been wrong. There was no meaning harvested from pain. Pain was not a key. Pain was not a prayer. Pain was noise. Terrible, enormous noise. But sometimes, when the noise became so vast that the self shattered beneath it, something could be heard underneath. Not God, not nothing. A question, the same question asked by every living thing from the first cell in the dark water to the last mouth, gasping on the last day. Are you still there? And beyond it, an answer. I cannot tell you the answer, not because I choose not to, because the answer was not made of words. It was made of being seen. My eyes opened. I was back in the white room, or my body was. The pain was there, but far below me, like a storm under glass. Madame Voss stood before me, her face transformed. She had seen my eyes. Everyone had. The audience behind the glass had risen to their feet. Some were crying. One man had dropped to his knees. Madame Voss came close. Her voice shook. Elise. I looked at her. She began to weep. What did you see? I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. She signaled frantically. Thomas brought water. She touched it to my lips with trembling fingers, tender now, worshipful now, monstrous in a different way. What did you see? She whispered. I told her. I watched the words enter her. I watched her faith split open. Her face changed the way Celine's had changed in the kitchen, only deeper. Recognition. Horror. Then something like peace, but not the gentle kind. The peace of a person who has stepped off a cliff and knows there will be no ground. She turned away from me. The audience pressed against the glass. Madame Voss, someone called through a speaker. Madame Voss, what did she say? The old woman did not answer. She walked to the tray and picked up the pistol Thomas had set there. Thomas moved toward her. Madame, she looked at him, and for 1 second I thought she might tell him. I thought she might give the order the sentence they had purchased with so many bodies. Instead, she smiled. Keep doubting, she said. Then she put the pistol under her chin and fired. The glass erupted in screams. Madame Voss dropped at my feet, black dress blooming red beneath the white apron. The audience scattered. Some pounded on the glass. Others ran for the door. Attendants froze, leaderless. Masks turned toward one another like insects deprived of the queen. Thomas stood staring at the body. Then he looked at me. His face was wet with tears. "What did you tell her?" he asked. I could have told him. Maybe I did. Maybe my lips moved and no sound came out. Maybe the dead spoke through me. Maybe Mara did. The lights began to flicker. Not from damage, from something else. A pulse moved through the room. The walls groaned. The drain beneath me filled not with blood now, but with black water rising from below. The audience screamed louder behind the glass as the water spread across the floor on their side too. The dead stepped fully into the light. The girl in the blue coat, the man with the sewn mouth, the backward armed woman, the boy with the tin cup, Thomas's sister, Mara, and me. The woman with my face stood in front of the frame and reached into my chest without breaking skin. I felt her hand close around something that was not a heart. She pulled. The straps fell away, or my body fell away. I am not sure which. I saw Thomas run. I saw him slip in the black water. I saw hands rise from it and touch his face, not cruelly, almost tenderly. I saw the glass crack as the audience pressed against it from the other side, their mouths open, their expensive clothes soaked. I saw Madame Voss lying still, one eye open, looking at nothing. Mara stood beside me. "You came back," I said. She smiled. "You never left." I looked down. My body was still on the frame. I think it was breathing. I think it was not. Its eyes were open. My eyes. They stared at the ceiling, reflecting points of light that were not there. Blood moved slowly down its legs. Its mouth was parted as if about to speak again. Mara took my hand. Her fingers were warm. That surprised me. Behind us, the white room lengthened into a corridor. At the far end was a door, not made of wood or steel, made of darkness filled with eyes. I knew that if I stepped through, I would understand the answer fully. I also knew that understanding might erase me. Behind me, someone was shouting my name. Thomas, maybe, or one of the order, or the body on the frame. Elise. The voice sounded far away. It sounded like rain above a cellar. It sounded like Mara in the hospital saying, "I believe you." It sounded like Celine calling from the farmhouse door, telling me I was almost there. I turned back one last time. The room was collapsing into panic. The black water rose to the ankles of the living. The dead moved among them, not attacking, only touching, only making them see. One by one, the faces of the order changed. Faith became terror. Terror became knowledge. Knowledge became something their bodies could not hold. The white lights flickered faster. Each darkness showed another world beneath this one. A field of glass, a sea of open mouths, a sky made of skin, a child beside a road at dawn, a woman on a frame, neither alive nor dead, with eyes full of stars. Mara squeezed my hand. Are you ready? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say no. I wanted to ask if pain ends. I wanted to ask if love survives what was done to us. I wanted to ask if the child in the cellar could finally sleep. But the door opened before I spoke, and from beyond it came not light, not darkness, but the feeling of being seen completely. Every wound, every cruelty, every act of rage, every moment of tenderness, nothing forgiven, nothing condemned, only held. I stepped forward, or I stayed. That is where memory fails. Maybe Thomas cut me down and carried my ruined body from the white room while the order burned behind us. Maybe I woke in a hospital years later, unable to speak, my eyes frightening nurses who would not meet them for long. Maybe I died on the frame before Madame Voss ever leaned close, and everything after was the final dream of a mind trying to make a door out of agony. Maybe I am still there. Maybe the body breathes in the white room, and the old machines keep time, and somewhere above, roses climb the walls of a house where a girl once screamed on a staircase. Or maybe I crossed. Maybe I am speaking from the other side of the question. Are you still there? I do not know who is listening now. I do not know if the voice you hear is mine, or the thing that wore my face, or the echo left behind when a person is emptied so completely that even death cannot decide what to do with her. But I know this: the order was wrong. Pain does not make saints. Suffering does not purify. There is no holiness in the knife, no wisdom in the hand that holds it, no heaven waiting eagerly for the broken to explain itself. There are only people, what they do to one another, what remains after, and somewhere, beneath every scream, the question, are you still there? If you are listening to this in the dark, if the room around you feels too still, if the corner behind you seems heavier than it should, do not turn too quickly. Some things follow pain. Some things are born from it. Some things crouch patiently beside us for years, waiting for us to mistake them for monsters, when all they ever were was the part of us that survived. Thank you for listening. If this story followed you into the dark, leave a like, share it with someone brave enough to listen alone, and subscribe for more horror told in the voice of those who may no longer be living. Until next time, good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment so divine. Whispers of